welcome Suranjana Satwalekar along with Hemant Suthar to our last keynote session. Suranjana is a design consultant working primarily in the area of themed environments, from corporate customer experiences to museums and heritage projects such as Reserve Bank Monetary Museum in Mumbai and visitor centers for TCS and NDDB. Hemant is a true design aficionado. He loves to keep up with everything happening in the world of design, be it graphics, interactive, or even architecture. A graduate from NID, he founded Fractal Ink back in 1997. Now I request Sudhir to take over and introduce us to this session. So over to you, Sudhir.
Okay, so thank you, Anshika, and thank you for introducing Suranjana and Hemant. So first, let me talk about Hemant. Hemant was my junior at NID, and I think we had, years back, the first offline meeting we had of Design India in Lonavala. Hemant, if you remember, you had come down with a few friends, and that was so lovely. So the other day I was going through pictures. I think you only sent me that picture a few years back. That was so lovely to see this. And many years later, you winning all these India's Best Design Awards and Fractal Design winning the awards, and then you selling this company off for a fat cash box or whatever. So that was so nice. Suranjana has been my teacher at NID. I did a project with Suranjana, and I won't tell anyone about this because, and I'm glad Suranjana doesn't remember it, because a photography project I did, and she was like, she didn't like it at all. She said, "कोई भी 10,000 फोटो खींचेगा तो दो तो अच्छा निकल ही आएगा ना." So it was like I was heartbroken. Suranjana, you are on mute. Can't hear you. So yeah, but ever since Vikas and Suranjana moved to Bombay and I moved to Pune, we've been off and on in touch quite a few times earlier when I was with Elephant Design, and recently because of the Pool magazine, and landed up spending some good time, very different time than the kind of time you actually spend when you are a teacher and a student. So this was more like a friend and a mentor. I remember I was with Vikas at a Pearl fashion design show in Bombay a few years back, and before that at IDC for a typography day, and then last 2 years at the Pool show. It was so lovely, and I thought Vikas is my permanent juror on the. It's such a I really don't know what all to say. So anyway, so this year it was very sad that we lost Vikas because of COVID, during COVID, and I connected with Suranjana. If Suranjana would become the juror, she did, and then I had another request to her that if she would come on as a speaker, and I wanted this to be a special session where we not only remember Vikas and talk about him, but we also get to know more about design from Suranjana and Vikas's side on from both of you, and also to look ahead, because this pandemic has meant many things to many people, and for you, very, very personal. For I can't just imagine what this must have meant. I know I can't conduct this session nicely, so I'm requesting, and I've requested Hemant, who graciously agreed, because both of you live very close by, and I know Vikas has Hemant spent good time with Vikas, so you can probably help Suranjana remember a few things and make her talk. She doesn't talk too much, so you have about 2 hours. Don't hurry. Yeah, okay. We have time. Don't worry about time. Okay. So let's start. Over to you, Hemant. I'll leave it to you. Pick it up, and I'm here.
Thanks, Sudhir, for giving this enormous opportunity to me. It's a big task. And like the earlier session, it was fantastic. And he also started by saying that it's a shishya trying to prod guru and trying to figure out things. Here I am prodding my guru to get her guru stuff out, basically. So I hope we could find out a little more about Vikas. We've known one side of him, but I think Suranjana knows a lot more than us. And let's try and discover some more stuff about Vikas. So I think first I would love to know something about how they met. So could you tell us about how you first met? And I believe it was a case of mistaken identity.
In my entrance, hi everybody. As you can I just say one thing, Hemant? Recently, very person I was really close to, Dr. B.N. Goswami's wife passed away, and I remember she always used to jokingly say that she's had to get used to the idea of standing in the Sultan's shadow. So at some level, that's, thank you, Sudhir, but you're making me do that. Yeah, so Vikas, well, actually, who I thought was Vikas wasn't really Vikas. I later discovered was in my entrance interviews in Presidency College in Kolkata, where we were doing our admission tests. Tridibesh and Siddharth used to go one batch senior to me, but pretended to be jolly side more senior because, you know, in that interview time, they both insisted that there was a person with a beard in the interview panel who had a ho-ho accent, and that was supposed to be Ashok Chatterjee, who was then the director of NID. So there was just one bearded, ho-ho man in there who didn't actually say very much. And so for the longest time, I thought that was Ashok Chatterjee. And when we joined NID in foundation in 1978, there was a long time when Vikas wasn't even on campus. He had gone to Ecograda to make a presentation of all of the Agri Expo project, if I remember right, the impact study that happened after Agri Expo. And then he was away in the US for very long. So I think the first time I registered Vikas was probably once we were already in exhibition design. Before that, we didn't really have much to do with him. Yeah.
So he didn't teach you?
No, I have taken great pains to always say this. Which he would, of course, turn into saying that you became it was your loss and you became a designer in spite of this terrible loss that I didn't teach you. But the flip side is that maybe we would never have got together if he had taught me. Who knows?
Yeah. So I heard that it was not design, but his cooking skills that got you two together?
To a large degree, yeah, because we were impoverished. And food was obviously a huge lure, and good food even more bigger lure. So yeah, and he's always been an excellent cook, and he never knew any spice by recognition. He would stick his nose into a bottle, and then figure out what to put. So he was very instinctive about his cooking. And as Ishan says that, for 10 years, we had to, when we had a cook, we had to tolerate the fact that what defined what we ate was the color of the food. The color had to be right.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, which pretty much meant that, Indian food, kind of robs vegetables of color. And Vikas would not like that to happen. I got ribbed a lot about Bengalis don't have teeth, they need to overcook their vegetables, etc. But yeah, So to him, food was as much a relaxation as a way to also express himself, I suppose. Yeah.
Great. And he always said that great designers are always great cooks.
Yeah. Yeah. I sort of fell a little short on that, but yeah, but all the meat, fish, etc. Would be my area of work. But yeah, he said, if you're a designer and you don't appreciate food, then what kind of a designer are you?
True that. So you have seen him in so many avatars, like from a teacher, a friend, a husband, a business partner. Can you tell us a little more about each of these different aspects?
Which one do you want me to start with?
Teacher, maybe.
Okay, so a friend, and I'm not just talking about me, friendship with reference to me. Vikas has made friends not very easily. He had crushing shyness, unbelievable at that sounds. New people, he took a little while to open up to. But he made a lot of friends who cared about him and who would be there for him. And he kind of knew that at the back of his head. But yeah, he was extremely loyal, but extremely gullible too. Yeah. If there was somebody he liked, he couldn't believe that they would have issues of any question of integrity, and those are very high values in his book. I mean, integrity surpasses everything. Integrity, personal integrity, integrity in the way you deal with the world, from the person who works for you, not professionally, but even your housemaid onwards. Integrity is very important, that you have to have respect for the way people are and the way, and just human beings. But sometimes I have actually had to tell him that maybe, you need to protect yourself sometimes from getting hurt. And yeah, I mean, he did. There were quite a lot of people who he was very surprised and very sad that they didn't quite meet up to his standards of what a human being should be. And he thought they had it. So yeah, he has, of course, been a very good friend to all of us and to a whole lot of people out there, even his ex-students, because I don't think he had a hierarchical issue in his head. So just because you have been my student once means that, that relationship and that hierarchy must always be maintained. So he had a lot of friends who were actually all his ex-students, and some equal footing. There was no up, down, no nothing. Yeah. Yeah, and you should know that. You know, Sudhir knows. There were a lot of people know, and some kids too.
Yeah.
So that was one very good thing. And yeah, we used to have these addas around our table, even in Ahmedabad, when, even when he was director, there were people who could walk in. I mean, even students who have been known to, come over for dinner, and there would not be a business about I'm the director or I'm senior faculty and you're still in third year or fourth year or whatever. None of that. So there he was very confident of where the line happened, and the line was very invisible. The line never had to be spelt out. Yeah, like he would never give them alcohol. No way. If they were still a student at NID, there was not a chance that they would get alcohol. So a Coke or a Nimbu Pani would be produced duly. Yeah.
And what about when he was the director and you were also at NID?
When he was the director, occasionally he was quite a pain. Yeah, because he was so super paranoid about anyone pointing a finger, in the possibility that somebody would point a finger and say that there is, oh, I spot some nepotism here. And so it would be like, I could be the sacrificial lamb on this. But I think one of the reasons we got along for 4 decades almost, and was because of brutal honesty between us, whether it was on work or whether it was on relationships or whether it was on anything. We may not have liked it at that particular point, but we respected that. So, so I used to have mother of fights with him about this. And there were enough faculty at NID who stood up for me as well and told him that, he's overreaching. So sometimes he was a bit of a pain, yeah. And I was doing discovery, and I was then in charge of one gallery. I never got to see the chief visualizer because the chief visualizer would spend time with everybody else except our gallery. And Mathur, who was then the project head, would keep saying that, oh, you guys are, running behind time and all of that. And we would say, well, the boss never shows up at our table. So tell him, don't tell us. But yeah, we can always talk later. We can talk later. We can take it up at home. Why don't you bring it home? We'll have a talk about it. Yeah, at that time, maybe I was also a pain because I refused to do that. But I have a memory from the discovery days when Ishan was, maybe a year and a half or so. And that kind of is very, very Vikas at one level. He suffered guilt for no reason, with no justification whatsoever, would not analyze why he's guilty. It's like, when a letter arrives from income tax, and it could just be, once upon a time, it used to be just a notification of something. Before opening the envelope, Vikas was sure that, the IT guys are on his case. And I had to keep telling him, you don't have enough money in the bank for them to worry about you. So I remember we used to go to work at night because Vikas was director. He was managing 2 things. He was managing discovery full time and being director. So he would go back to the studio after dinner. And Ishan used to throw this huge tantrum about, Mama ko jaane do, aap nahi jao. And both son and father would sit and bawl. And of course, I would skip off because I had been let off the hook. So yeah, he's always been there for us. Bend over backwards. Of course, admonishing us and saying, you guys too much wanting, too much, you guys have too many needs, but he'll pander to it also. So yeah, he was that all right and all along. And that is also something he would do for friends. He was generous. He was very, very generous in spirit. Not just to us, but generosity is something fully. In a project, they have run out of material. He wouldn't think twice giving his personal, at NID, giving his personal stash of sticky paper, which used to be a big deal. We were getting from 3M import at one point. But he won't think about it because, work has to get done. It has to get done well. And if I have the material, so be it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And like a lot of people, like our couples who are running studios. And I think later part of your life, I think you both also ran studio together. So what was that experience like?
It was good fun. And professionally, as well, we could be really, really critical of each other. Very, very critical. And I think that was excellent because it helped, we kind of, without in so many words, but we actually kind of pushed each other. You can, to justify to somebody in a jury is one thing. To justify a design decision to a client is another thing. But to justify it to each other would be that much more difficult. And he took criticism, quite a lot of exhibition projects where he played comparative second fiddle, comparative. But I would give him hell saying, yeah, this doesn't work, and send him back to the board. That's happened a lot. So professionally, I think it worked very well. And let's face it, we were two people working together across 2 rooms with a landing in between. And I was just thinking that, how we communicated during on work was I would do something, and if I wanted his opinion, I'd stick it in the Dropbox and send him a WhatsApp message, and he's just across the corridor. Send him a WhatsApp message and say, have a look. And he would do the same. So we've actually been doing that for a hell of a long time. But there were things like, I would pull his leg about saying, you graphic design people have fetishes, why do you need to have a grid to do a panel? I come from the Dashrath Patel school of education, gut, visual decisions, etc. I've never done a grid in my whole life, and I'm not about to start. And Vikas stopped doing it too. So good influence there. One of the recent challenges I think that he got was, and I gave him that challenge more to get him out of my hair and stop complaining and wringing his hands in desperation, and what was really about this whole business of online education. And he kept saying, I know he told Bala, who is supposed to take a class at JKLU in color, and Bala, I think, asked him, would you consider doing this online because the lockdown has happened? And Vikas said, it's like tasting wine online or some rubbish like that. So, so he would keep saying, there's something you can't do, you cannot do this, you can't, So one day I got really frustrated and I told him, all of us, and we belong to the same school of thinking, was that when you are pushed against a wall, you find a solution, so you have to turn it on its head. If you think what online education is happening now is not up to scratch, get down to it and figure out how it should be. And it's a shame that actually he didn't finish doing that because he was super excited. He started doing a whole lot he started talking to people. He was having long conversations with various people in Pearl and UPS, besides various people from, his own friends, people like Nina and all who were setting up at IDC an online portal for education. But he got really excited because you have the fact that you have to turn it on his head is what got him going. So if I have to say one thing about Vikas that I think is a value worth emulating, is that to him, every challenge, as Ishan says, every challenge was a privilege. And a client gave him a job and it would be like, oh my God, he has put so much faith in me and I have to kill myself to be able to give him the best possible. Because again, it's that matter of integrity, is that matter of saying I can't ever sell him short. And it wasn't about the money. It was about the faith that somebody would entrust in giving you a job. And I think that is what got him going. I don't know, a lot of people don't know this. By the way, Hemant, shut me up whenever. Sorry about my not talking very much, but that's okay. There was a time when he had, What do you
say, Hemant, don't do that. Don't listen to Suranjana.
There was a time when he had just handed over charge as director, and he was a comparative faltu, can't use a better word. And he was sort of starting to get used to the idea that he has 4 years left to go before he finishes with NID. And he decided, okay, so while all this is happening, he was, of course, involved with Khalsa at that point. We were working on Khalsa at that point, so he was doing that. And he was a member of the core team. But in between, he thought, oh, there were these wonderful recordings that of Dylan Thomas from the library, which were all on records, vinyls. Then there was, Robert Frost being recited by Richard Burton, and those were all his favorite things. And he got Paul to loan him the record player, put it up in his studio, and started transferring them onto CDs. And then he realized, of course, that those were really old and they had scratches and they were not perfect recordings. So Vikas taught himself SoundForge so that he could go clean them up. Likewise, when we were building the top floor of this house, the architect started sending us really bad AutoCAD drawings. And the only way that you could fix it and say what you wanted and not get confused and get the guy confused was to learn AutoCAD. Enough in order to be able to correct a plan, move a window, do whatever, change dimensions and all. And I realized just before he went to hospital, I think he had just signed up for an advanced course in Illustrator. So the fact that age is no issue. If you have the willingness to say, I need to keep improving my skills and I need to keep knowing more, isn't that what defines a designer finally?
Right. And that brings me to another question. Like, we all worshipped him like God of design and treated his classes like master class.
You didn't bunk, you mean?
No, never bunked.
Okay.
It was a privilege that he took our class. We always consider that. So we would like to know what he thought of himself. Could you tell us more about that?
He was low on self-esteem. Like if somebody, if he would be approached by somebody to be an advisor, he would be like, oh, why do they think I can bring any value to this? So I don't know whether, but so he was always, he had a benchmark for excellence, which he never actually thought he set the benchmark. But sometimes I think he felt he hadn't quite got there. And so it's, so sometimes it was not a confidence issue, and not so much about education or professional practice or whatever, but just as a human being. If somebody said something really nice to him, he used to be the biggest behind my back stalker on Facebook. Yeah. And if he couldn't remember a face, if somebody sent him a message and he couldn't remember a face, he would say, just look him up. Maybe he's a friend of yours on Facebook. Show me some photographs so that I can put name to face and figure out. So it was a big stalker that way. And I would read out. Sometimes somebody wrote something about him, which was very complimentary, and he was genuinely surprised. Oh, that's really nice of them. So that was weird in a way.
Yeah.
But but he always had that.
Yeah.
Always had that.
And he was a pure aesthete and a perfectionist. He loved his food, from sourdough bread to the finest cheese to the finest single.
Tell us about it. We didn't necessarily share the love of all of it with him.
Yeah, but where did it all started? I mean, how did he develop this taste for finest things in life?
I think the single malt fetish, I think, is probably because of having really good friends in advertising, because his salary till he left NID certainly could not run to single malts. On food, always has always been very should be very well informed and extremely careful about what he had with what. Like, he knew his cheeses, and I remember in Little Italy, Ahmedabad, which they thought they would get away with a 4 cheese pasta or something, and they had actually put Amul, and he insisted that he had to speak to the chef. And it turned out to be true. And they apologized and all of that. So those kind of things he's always had. And I think Basel maybe going to Switzerland, of course, must have introduced him to a whole lot of things which were not available in India. But that, and subsequently, he's had friends globally when he traveled. He's had friends, a lot of friends in Bombay, a lot of advertising friends, and so on. So yeah, all that comes from it. But and even in clothes, he would.
That too.
He still went back to his tailor in Ricky in Ahmedabad. They were still stitched, by and large. And yeah, and he had a huge shoe fetish, which we didn't quite realize how big that fetish was, because it's only after he went that we started looking around for stuff that we said, oh my God, when the hell did he buy these shoes? Yeah, so he was all of that.
And we all know.
He lived good design, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, and he didn't understand why anyone should be any different. How can you have a dichotomy there? You are who you are. If design matters in your life, it's not, I don't take it only to a classroom or to my project. That's how I live. So yeah.
And we all know that he had a great sense of humor. And I didn't know this, and I just heard this, that is it true that he unbuttoned his shirt after his farewell speech at NID?
I was told in his farewell. But yeah, I was told he was wearing, I mean, I was told by other people. So he was wearing a t-shirt that the visual communication gang had in that drawing behind me.
Yeah.
Part of his was part of his the gift that was given to him by the whole visual communication faculty, students, everyone put together as a farewell gift, and that was done by, I think, an animation student. I'm not sure of the name, but so they had given him a t-shirt, a yellow t-shirt, his favorite chrome yellow, and at the back they had done a sort of stamp of his face, which and said "Jolly" under it. And they also made a stamp of it, which they gave him the stamp as well, which I thought was fantastic. So he's wearing that t-shirt under a fully buttoned up black shirt for his official farewell at NID.
Brilliant.
And yeah, at the end of it, he's apparently said that, the one thing that people keep asking me, what am I going to do after I retire? And I was just thinking, maybe I'll take to the catwalk. And that's when he apparently did it. And I believe people sitting on the front row had a bit of a shock. Yeah, he did. But I believe there was also complete hysterics in the auditorium because of that. Yeah. I mean, he could do unpredictable things like that. Yeah, he could.
So we learned a lot more about Vikas, and there are a lot of young listeners here. And could you tell them about some of the key qualities a designer must possess in order to deal with the remote working and all the kind of situation we are now?
No, I'm not much into Gyan per se. But when we were talking the other day, I just realized that Vikas and I have been actually doing this remote working thing since 1998, when we started working on the Khalsa project, because our architect, who as most architects go, required a lot of interaction, because we were making some significant changes to the way the building was going to be. And he was sitting in Boston or in Jerusalem. So even things like specifying how much light should come through the light shafts were done by somebody from his office who was sitting in Canada. So we've been doing this for a long time. And the fact that we run a practice or have run a practice where we didn't employ anyone unless it was, and it was not really an employee, we would get people to work for us on projects so that we kind of matched ability and inclination to the particular need of the project. And we wanted to keep that freedom so that, different filmmakers, different, people to work with us on graphics and content. And I think because we're very lucky, both of us, because we have this massive network of students, which we can, and they've been very kind and never ever refused to work with us. Maybe we're not such bad people, but the fact still remains that collaboration has been how we have always worked. And therefore, per se, the COVID has not really made a great difference to our practice. But we're beginning to realize some things because a lot of our work involves site-related things, which are physical. If I have to check a prototype, I'm a bit deeply uncomfortable that we are checking prototypes with some vague phone video where the black of the powder coating is looking like slate gray because it's in bright sunshine, so you can't really tell if the black is really black. And those are a bit of pitfalls that we have to deal with. And I was also wondering how we will deal with such a situation in education. We were in discussions over, I'm a member of the review, not curriculum, but sort of course reviews of CEPT for interior design. And they did the entire course semester in online. And you do wake up and you do an interior, eventually you will have to feel material. Eventually you will need to experience a volumetric space. Yeah. So there would be some limitations in some professions, definitely. But I do realize one thing, and that is your communication skills have to be, it's not about language, but it's about clarity of thinking and clarity of expression. It doesn't matter if it's grammatically incorrect, how you're saying it. It doesn't even matter if it is English. You can write it in Hindi. Today, it's not a problem communicating to anyone in any language, through WhatsApp or whatever. All languages are available. But you have to be very clear in your head, and you've got to be very clear in what you're saying, because you can easily be misconstrued without intention sometimes, and we are discovering on a recent project of us very much through intent, where approvals are assumed because you never read something and things like that. So a lot of vigilance, it becomes, I don't like the fact that we are now more stuck to the computer than we need to be. I do resonate what I heard Adil say that, we're people, we do need to meet sometimes. We need to go to site. We need to go see what the contractor is actually doing, where he is doing. And that is a bottleneck that I can't see getting resolved very easily in the future, in the immediate future, shall we say. But yeah, I would say communication. The second thing that I think we should actively encourage, if we are not actually doing it, is that it enables us to remove hierarchies. So if I'm heading a project which has a very big team, I don't have to speak to the graphic design guys separately and the product design guys separately. I can talk to the whole lot in one shot. So everyone shares in the same vision at the same time, and nobody is bigger or smaller or a lesser cog in the wheel. And that I think is important, especially in organizations which have, such as advertising, which has built silos, which are unfortunate. I think silos are not really productive anymore, and especially in this kind of an environment. where I think hierarchies should be removed. Transparency has become next to impossible to avoid and should not be avoided. You know, if you've goofed it as the senior person or whatever, the mistake is there for you to see. You may as well own it up. So I think a lot more accountability now is something that we should expect from people we are collaborating and even ourselves. And that could have got kind of slipped under the carpet before, but not, I don't think anymore. Yeah.
And given this scenario, how do you see that design education will change, and what kind of systemic changes you foresee?
I couldn't hear you, Hemant.
Yeah. So how do you see design education changing now, and what kind of systemic changes do you foresee?
I haven't really been very involved with education other than SEPT actually.
Okay.
But I think, as I was telling Vikas, I think we've got to stop fiddling around saying what I could take in class one-on-one, or maybe, you know, if I could deal with a class physically of 20 people, and all that's happened is those 20 people are now on Zoom, and I can still do pretty much the same thing that I was doing. I think that is selling the student short. Absolutely. I have no doubt about that. You can't do that. You have to innovate different ways in which you bridge the gap that an interaction of the kind that we are used to is no longer possible. So you have to innovate. You have to figure out how you are going to teach some. For instance, I think one of the things that I was talking to Vikas about, and I said, how are you going to teach color, which is pigment, to somebody who's only seeing it on RGB? So we have to worry about all that. So which means that we will have to take this as a challenge and turn it around. Maybe you will teach color not through pigment anymore. I don't know. That could be a solution, that you will teach it through RGB and what. You know, you can teach color interaction. Not that I ever did a color course beyond foundation. And fortunately, Vikas is not hearing me, so that's good. But, you know, I'm sure you can do color interaction through RGB, but you'll have to reinvent that whole space. You see, and I think it's not a matter of, okay, you send your drawings, you think of doing this, do this assignment, go and do some, make a model, go and do some market survey and come back to us. How is the faculty even checking the authenticity of this? And it's becoming, and I'm not saying you should distrust the student, but the fact is, how do you know that experience is real? And therefore, how do you know that learning is actually being absorbed and, you know, digested? So I think there is huge room for innovation in education and methodologies. And I remember Ranjan in this has always said, you know, when people used to ask him that you do design concepts and concerns for 20 people, 25 students, and now you're doing it for 120. How will you do it? He said, we'll have to devise methods. Assignments will have to be engineered to it. It's hard work. It's not sitting and doing bhashan on Zoom.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rita. Yeah, so that brings us to a close. And
oh, good.
Great talking to you. And we always had Vikas with us, and we had him here through you this time. And it was a great chance. And I'll hand it over to Sudhir now. And thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Hemant.
Thank you, Hemant, and Suranjana. Thank you so much. It was so good to know so much more, and you realize that it's impossible to know a person in so much detail, right? There's always something new stories, new things to learn from. It just never ends. Thank you so much. I'm sure a lot of people will learn. A lot of people are learning, and I'm learn further. So, okay, on the side, there are some good comments coming up.
Oh, I'm reading them now.
Yeah,
Yeah, when I didn't.
this recording up, and a lot of people have been asking, can I see this later? Can I see this later? Messages coming, so you'll see this later. So thank you for that session. I think it was needed, and we needed to remember Vikas in such a inspiring and positive light once again, especially during times like this. So Suranjana, thank you. I wish we were in Conrad Hotel like last year. But anyway, so this brings me to the close of today's event. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you.